Well, hey there. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Randy Fink, and we are live this evening from Panama City, Florida. And it's time for Fertility with Fink. We got a little false start there for a moment. If you saw a little something saying that we were live, and then away it went, and here we are again. So a little technical issue there. Sorry about that. But so happy to have you with me this evening. It's 5 o'clock Central Time, which means 6 o'clock on the East Coast. 4 in the mountains and 3 on the west. Fertility with Fink is what we do every Tuesday evening at this time to talk about all those things that are important to us. And that is the business of making a family, the business of getting pregnant, the business of doing all those things that we know are important here. We've got a bunch of different feeds. We've got my Instagram feed right here, and that's Randy Fink MD. Oh gosh, you know what? Actually, I think we are all on the same feed. That's Randy Fink MD. We are not doing New Life Fertility here. Hello to everybody. We've got Facebook and Instagram, LinkedIn over here, and YouTube. And I think, you know what I did is I think I forgot to set up the, I put both of these feeds on my Instagram feed. So I'm not sure which one you're actually looking at, but one of these is supposed to be New Life Fertility's Instagram. And hey, what do you know? I forgot. So we'll just broadcast this after the fact over there on New Life. How's it going, everybody? Happy Tuesday. I hope your weekend was good. We're thinking a lot tonight about all of our friends in the Caribbean, particularly in Jamaica, where Hurricane Melissa has just come ashore. And boy, she is going to leave a wrath going across the Caribbean and then through Cuba and up through the Bahamas and onto our friends in Bermuda. And we have had friends from all those places join us on the program here. And so I doubt tonight any of those people are able to join us. However, our thoughts go out to you, certainly, for sure. Speaking of Melissa, hello, Melissa. Thank you very much for being the number one right here tonight. And you know what? In fact, a special cheers to you. Hydration is key. Queen Christina, it looks like Christina Bita. Thank you for being here. Lexi, hi, how are you? Congratulations, Lexi, on that great ultrasound result. For those of you who were not able to, or who don't know, Lexi's been going through some fertility treatment. She lives up in the Carolinas and had a bit of a scare there originally because the first ultrasound was kind of pretty far off in terms of dating. And so weren't really sure what was happening, but she got a nice ultrasound that showed pregnancy inside the uterus. And I'm not sure, but I hope that you were able to see that heartbeat because that's very exciting stuff. You know, ultrasound, we look at ultrasound and think of it as being so very exact. It must be so precise, but it turns out that there can be an error of measurement of up to a week in the first trimester by ultrasound as far as measuring pregnancy. In the second trimester, it can be 2 weeks off, and in the third trimester, even up to 3 weeks difference. So as you get more pregnant, ultrasound becomes less accurate, becomes less precise. And that's an important thing to know because when we date your pregnancy and give you a due date, let's say it's based on the date of your last menstrual period, we are looking for the ultrasound to correlate with that within about 5 to 7 days of accuracy. When we've done IVF or an embryo transfer, we can usually get it a little bit more precise. But when with a spontaneous pregnancy, 5 to 7 days. So oftentimes we'll give you a due date, and then you'll go and you'll have your anatomy ultrasound done between 17 to 20 weeks. And they may say a different date. And you think, oh, that means that my due date changed. Nope, due date stays the same. It's based on the earliest possible measurement that we have. All right, so important thing to know, purple butterflies. Hello, good evening, and hi to Wendy. Hey, Rosa. Rosa is 39 weeks and 3 days today, and had a membrane sweep. Oh no, coming up in a few days. Can't make up my mind. Is there a risk of breaking the waters before my body is ready and kick off the cascade of intervention? So I would say yes. A membrane sweep basically is, so your cervix kind of looks like this, right? And when we sweep the membranes, also called stripping the membranes, what we're doing, fingers are going in here, and we're literally trying to separate the placenta, or rather the amniotic fluid and membrane, which is sitting right here. We're just trying to cause a little bit of separation around that, which can start the flood of the cascade, as you say, of issues that initiate the forces of labor. And I would say, yep, Rosa, at 39 weeks, there is really no added benefit to you still being pregnant. And if your cervix is dilated enough that they're able to strip your membranes, then you're in good shape to go ahead and go into labor at any time now, my friend. So we're all counting the minutes to see your baby for sure. Let's see who else we got here tonight with us. Hi to Jess Koval and million times two. Marie, good to see you this evening. Shada, hey, how are you, my friend? Morgan, hi there. Hello to Marin and Zaneta in Miami. Hello, Zaneta. The Meg Johnson, Kowser. Hello, my friend. Great to see you as well. Let's see. Purple Butterfly says, is progesterone in oil necessary for a day 3 fresh transfer after an egg retrieval, or are the progesterone suppositories sufficient? The only meds that were used were the trigger shot, HCG, and letrozole 7.5. The answer is yes. Unfortunately, you do need more progesterone. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need that progesterone in oil every single day. But the evidence is very clear that using some extra progesterone and using it in the form of the injection improves the outcomes. So we have some protocols where we will only do that progesterone in oil every 3rd day, for instance. Listen, I'll tell you, it is everybody's least favorite thing to do in all of fertility. Second, maybe to an HSG. The HSG, the dye test, that's no fun for sure. But getting that progesterone shot in your butt is no fun. But vaginal progesterone alone is not considered to be sufficient to maintain significant enough progesterone levels in order to maintain a pregnancy. So for that reason, progesterone in oil is recommended, depending on, your practice should be able to offer it to you, but every 3 days ought to be sufficient after a fresh transfer. Good question there. Morgan says, I have an AFC, that's an antral follicle count of 4. My AMH is 0.6. I'm 32 years old and had 1 prior miscarriage. I'm starting IVF, and I'm wondering if we should do PGT testing if I'm able to get 1 or 2 embryos. Well, so you are fighting against some biology there. The antral follicle count means the number. So what happens in the beginning of the cycle is that your brain starts talking to the ovaries and it says, give me some eggs. And the ovary says, okay. And so it ladles down into its little well and it comes up with some follicles. And those follicles will sit there and they'll start to fight with each other because one of those follicles is going to emerge as the dominant follicle or the dominant egg. And that's the one that's going to get ovulated when that time comes during your cycle. Well, so 5 or fewer antral follicles is considered a lower than average number, but with that AMH of 0.6, that confirms for me that, your lower ovarian reserve is a real thing. So the first question is, do I do the PGT testing? All right, so PGT, as you probably know, is where we grow those embryos to the blastocyst stage. And we take a sample of this, typically a day 5 embryo, but sometimes day 6, right? And we take a sample of the cells from the outside part of the embryo. And that's the portion of the embryo that's going to become the placenta, right? And then we test the chromosomes to see which embryo is chromosomally normal. And so your question, should I do the testing or not? Well, I look at that in a couple of different ways, Morgan. And that is, first thing is, well, what's the background risk for you having normal versus abnormal embryos? And at 32 years old, I can tell you that in my lab, an untested blastocyst will get you about a 40% probability of a pregnancy. It's about 40% probability, and that's a good number. Other places may be closer to 30. We're pretty high in that regard, but that 40% number would be the same if you were 32 versus 28 versus 26. You're still in pretty good shape with eggs coming from a 32-year-old. So the first thing I wonder about is, well, what's the background risk? Because if you're 39, then those eggs are much more likely to be abnormal and thus create an abnormal embryo. People think, well, but I have to do the PGT testing, right? Because we want a normal baby. And I say, oh, you want a normal baby? Well, look, everybody wants a normal baby. The PGT testing is not to determine which baby is going to be normal versus abnormal, because an abnormal embryo really just doesn't implant inside the uterus. So in most cases, an abnormal embryo just doesn't give you a positive pregnancy test. So what you're looking for is to decrease the number of potentially unsuccessful embryo transfers. Now, in your case, you're starting with an antral follicle count of 4. So we know that you're not going to be making tons of embryos, right? And you said yourself, if I'm able to get 1 or 2 embryos, my feeling is that, look, if you've got only 1 or 2 embryos, you can transfer both of those embryos. And your body is going to tell you the same information, and that is the embryo normal? If the answer is yes, it will stick. And if it's not going to stick in all probability. So do you need to spend all that extra money on PGT testing only to learn what your body is going to tell you anyway? And my answer to that is, if you get a couple of embryos, no, I would not recommend PGT testing for a couple of embryos. Now, here's another way to think about that. What if you were to do a cycle of IVF and make some embryos, and then you did another cycle of IVF, and then another cycle of IVF? And I would tell you, with those numbers, I would want you to keep in your mind the possibility that you might want to be doing 3 cycles of IVF. And if you do that, then you may have a couple of embryos from one cycle and a couple from the second and a couple from the third. Before you know it, now you're at 6, or God willing, maybe even 8 embryos there. And then doing that PGT testing makes a lot of sense, because it can help you to select which embryo has the greater probability of getting you pregnant. Even though I would tell you, again, in my lab, 40% is the probability of an untested blast being successful at 32 years old, compared to about 65%. So what does PGT get you? Get you about a 25% improvement in the pregnancy rate for any given transfer. So that's kind of the way I think about it, Morgan, and I hope that is helpful. Looks like blank days. My transfer you did back in May of 2024 is now 9 months old. Wow, that is fantastic news. Please send me a picture, because I would love to post those pictures. And I've said this before, if I was involved in helping to make your baby, please send me a picture. I love those. I treasure them, and I would love to put them in my story so that everyone can see how wonderful you have done. Hey to Bailey Crump, nice to see you this evening. A million times, this is my favorite show ever. Well, I have to tell you, it is my favorite time of the week. Because Mondays are really just kind of Mondays. And Mondays. Tuesdays, I often have very long days. This one, as I mentioned, I am here in Panama City, one of our outlying satellite offices. And, it's kind of a long day here. I had to drive. I was in Dothan, Alabama yesterday and Panama City here. So, tired. And I'm like, well, maybe I should cancel tonight. Maybe I should just hit the road and get back home 2.5 hours to kind of get home. But then I'm like, then I start to set things up and I sit down and I say, you know what? I love being here. I love being able to have these conversations and to be a part of this community. So I am so pleased, Million, that you are here tonight. And I thank you very much. Zenny, thank you for the kind compliment. This color shirt looks great on me. Well, it is pink and I am in touch with my pink side. That is my female side. I'm in touch with my feminine side. Thank you very much, Cindy. I appreciate that. Hello to my mother in Mobile, Alabama. And Dad, thank you for being here. And the wonderful Dr. Lori Rips is joining from ASRM in San Antonio. So ASRM is the American Society for Reproductive Medicine. And their annual conference is this week in San Antonio. My partner, Dr. Barry Rips, got to go while I got to stay home and work. But nevertheless, Dr. Lori is his beautiful and very, very talented wife, really a big brain on her own, someone who is really just a wonderful soul, wonderful mind, great person. And I'm glad you two got to go to San Antonio there, and I hope you're having a good time. Keep your eyes on social media because there's a lot of stuff coming out in the fertility world from ASRM in San Antonio. I believe next year is in Baltimore. And so 1 year from now, I better be there. I'm just saying. All right, what else we got going on here? Million, that water bottle is gorgeous. I love to hear it. Okay, SB Charles, hello, nice to see you in Savannah. Hi, Angela. Let's see, Kauser says, what are the precautions I need to take to successfully do a transfer, and what is the use of metformin? I'm taking 100 milligrams twice. Probably taking maybe 500 milligrams twice a day for 1,000 milligrams. So metformin is a medication that is used for folks who have insulin resistance. And what is insulin resistance? Insulin resistance goes a little something like this. So, our bodies are pretty skilled at keeping our blood sugar between here and here, between the low and the high. We're pretty good about keeping it in there. So blood sugar is kind of running somewhere kind of like right around in here. So what happens if you go and you eat a Milky Way and you drink a Coke? Well, your blood sugar does what? It goes, it gets way up here, right? And so the body says, oh, no, wait, we want to keep it, down in here. So what do? You make insulin. And the insulin goes up here. It takes that blood sugar and it brings it back down here to keep your sugar in the normal range. Insulin resistance occurs when we have to make more and more insulin in order to get that blood sugar back down there into the normal level. In most cases, our bodies can compensate for that insulin resistance, that we're able to do that to keep our blood sugar where it needs to be. But sometimes we can reach a point where we make so much insulin, but yet we're so resistant to it that we can't even get that blood sugar back down below the level. And so our blood sugar normally starts to run here, or here, or here, somewhere above that range. And that is what we call type 2 diabetes. Well, insulin resistance is a big problem in our society. In fact, even internationally, this is something that affects anyone and everyone. It's often associated with having extra weight. So little of this business right here is insulin resistance. And so some people say that, in fact, it's even a life hack to think about taking something like metformin, which may be able to help that insulin resistance kind of get better. It brings down, it sensitizes the body. Well, insulin resistance is commonly associated with polycystic ovarian syndrome. So that's typically, kind of where we see it. And we know that in that scenario, if we use some extra metformin, then we can improve the embryo transfer outcomes, and we can decrease the risk for miscarriage, and also decrease the risk associated with getting pregnant and having type 2 gestational diabetes. And gestational diabetes is insulin resistance associated with the pregnancy itself. So metformin in that scenario, Counselor, is generally a pretty good thing. Angela, nice to see you. Can I have an SIS during a retrieval cycle? And the answer to that is yes, you certainly can. So you may know that I do also some work. I'm a part of New Life Fertility in Pensacola, Florida, and we're part of a network that's called the First Fertility Network. I do some other work with a wonderful, wonderful practice in St. Louis that's called the Missouri Center for Reproductive Medicine, MCRM. Pardon me. At MCRM, I'm all choked up when I talk about MCRM. Pardon. At MCRM, almost everybody gets a saline sonogram that's done at the time of the egg retrieval. So yes, as long as you're not planning to do a fresh embryo transfer, in which case I wouldn't want to be messing with that uterine lining at all, you can definitely do a saline sonogram during a retrieval cycle, Angela, for sure. Hi, Noodles for life. Good to see you. Shada says, when doing Lupron, do you wait for bleeding, or do you go right to the transfer meds after the 8 or 12 weeks from the first shot? You can go either way, but what we do know is that when you stop I'm sorry, gosh. When you stop your suppression for endometriosis with the Lupron, that you do best when you can conceive in that cycle immediately afterwards. So I tend to start medication right away. I don't think you need to wait for a bleed. I go right from Lupron into using estradiol for your embryo transfer. So that's how I do it. I don't think there's harm either way. Some people would say, oh, hold off and wait a few days and see if you get a bleed. What I wouldn't do is hold off for a month and have a normal cycle after that Lupron, because then, you kind of, the clock is ticking after you've finished using the Lupron for suppression. So I'd say keep it going, keep going there. Hey to Daisy in South Florida. Nice to see you this evening. And Florida girl, thank you for being here. Noodles for Life says, which FET, frozen embryo transfer protocol, is better after an endometriosis suppression with a thin lining? Well, if the lining is naturally thin, I think you might do better with a medicated cycle. Because in a medicated cycle, we can start you on some estrogen and just stay on that estrogen until the lining gets thick enough to the point that we feel like it is safe for you to go ahead and do start your progesterone. So we're looking for minimum of about 6.5 to 7 millimeter lining. So I would say, after finishing suppression, I would go with a medicated cycle, especially if you have an issue of having a thin lining anyway. That's kind of my 2 cents worth on that, Miss Noodles. Shada says, it's been a couple of months since my lining been a couple of months that my lining is very thin. I was on stim meds for a while. I'm concerned this would be a problem when it comes time to transfer. How can I help my lining for right now? Well, I would suggest that there is a supplement that is known as L-arginine, and L-arginine happens to be an amino acid, but what it does is that it increases blood flow to the uterine lining. And so now if you're on suppression right now, you may not have much uterine lining, but still you can increase blood flow to the area where that lining would grow. So I'd say that's probably a nice little intervention. It turns out that it's 6 grams a day of the L-arginine, and you can take that in divided doses if you want, break it up. But I would say that's probably a reasonable thing to try. I think it would be very helpful and certainly wouldn't harm anything. But to know that while you're on Lupron, of course, your lining is going to get very thin because you've shut off the hormones. And so that's expected. So I wouldn't say, oh, you have to do something about it because that lining is thin on Lupron. That's where we think it ought to be. Okay. Sorry about that. I don't know what the heck is going on here. Hey, guess what time it is? It's 5:30, which means it is time for the 5:30 Fuzzies with Fink. What the heck are the Fuzzies with Fink? Am I talking about chest hair? Am I talking about facial hair? I'm not talking about hair at all. It's the warm and fuzzy thing that we do every evening at 1/2 the hour on this program. And that is where we take a moment to get everyone who needs our thoughts into our mind, and we share together the fond, kind wishes that we all have as a community. There's a lot going on out there in the world right now. Maybe some of you are going through fertility things. Imagine probably so. That's why you're on this broadcast. But it goes beyond that. You know, maybe you've got family who's sick. Maybe you have a friend who's not doing well. Maybe there's a job thing or a relationship thing. Maybe you've got friends in Jamaica who are getting battered by the storm tonight. Whatever it is, I know that when we stand together as a community, as one, and send out these warm and fond wishes to everyone out there who needs our love, we're doing something for the universe here. I think we're making a difference. And so at 5:30, 1/2 every Tuesday evening, I want to reach out. I want to say the names to everybody I have here: Holiday Homemaker, Noodles, Ashley, looks like Alicia Joe, Cowser, Lauren, Jazzy Poo, Beach Bum, Maria, Zaneta, Amber, Ruger, Kate Balky, Lexi, Daisy, and all the folks, Emily and Harold, SB Charles, Angela, who else we got here? Million times 2. Meg Johnson, Marin, for you for sure, to Shada, to Jess, to Grace. Hey, Grace, haven't seen you for a while. Looks like these are most of the names. If I skipped yours, please forgive me, but let's just take a moment to all put our hearts together and send out the very best wishes, the very finest thoughts for great things ahead to everybody who needs it right now. So from all of us to all of you, we're here with you. And that, my friends, is the 5:30 Fuzzies with Fink. Please ask your friends to join next week, even if it's only for a few minutes, because the more people who can be here at that 5:30 mark, the more people can send out those warm wishes. And I really honestly believe that is how we change the universe. So thanks for being here for that. All right, moving right along here. Got some other questions going on. You really are, oh, Noodle says, you really are the best doctor, both online and in person. Thank you. Thank you very much. much. I do appreciate that. That really means the world to me. Ashley Pearl, good evening. Alicia, looks like Alicia Joe, my embryo from the retrieval that you did just turned 9 months. Oh gosh, unbelievable. Thank you. Transfer number 2 in January. What would you say is the probability of an inconclusive embryo since I have 2 inconclusive embryos left? Okay, so I think you're talking about you did PGT testing, right? And the results came back inconclusive. And what that means is, look, when they're doing this biopsy, they got to be really careful with these embryos because they're, literally they're microscopic. And so what they're doing is they're taking just a few cells. They're taking, 5, 6 cells, which is not a lot of material. Those cells go into some media that then gets shipped. It has to get processed at the genetics lab. And so sometimes those cells just don't survive the processing. It's not an uncommon thing to happen. So you end up getting a result from your genetic testing that says it is inconclusive. Well, that doesn't mean anything is wrong with it. Basically, what that means is that it's simply an untested blastocyst. And the results of transferring an untested blastocyst are going to be really based entirely on your age at the time that those embryos were made. So how successful will you be? In my laboratory, if you're under 35, let's just say 34 or less, that untested blast gives you a 40% probability of success. So my answer to you is, well, and for that matter, even if you're 42, while it gives you a much lower probability of success just based upon the age of those eggs alone that made those embryos, there is absolutely still a chance, because if the embryologist felt that it was a good enough embryo to freeze, then it is a good enough embryo to be able to give you a baby. So I would say 100% those embryos are not throwaways. They are still very much good embryos. So yes, indeed on that one. Should you transfer 2 together? I think it depends on your history, and I think it also depends on your age there, Alicia. So, we tend to try to follow the guidelines on that multiple embryo transfer thing from the American Society for Reproductive Medicine. So let's say it's your first transfer and you're 22 years old. I'd say, no way. We want you to have 1 healthy baby at a time. Twins does not, transferring more than 1 embryo does not improve the odds of a live birth in most cases, unless you've had unsuccessful transfers before. And then you can think about transferring more than 1. But in that scenario, it sounds like I don't think that would be unreasonable. So yeah, I think you can. Florida girl, hello. Which vitamins and supplements from the Vitamin Victory protocol do you stop at transfer? Currently taking them and transferring on Saturday. Okay, so 2 questions that you're bringing up there. First is, what is the Vitamin Victory? And I would say, excellent question. That's a little ebook that I wrote with the evidence-based protocols for what can a handful of vitamins do to help us get pregnant. And so there is an evidence, and where can you find such a book? It's only $7, and it includes a coupon that'll get you a discount that's worth about $26, I think, for those supplements if you choose to buy them from that particular distributor. Look at my Instagram, and that's Randy Fink MD, and you will see that there is a link right underneath the name. It's my link tree, or you can look at Linktree, linktr.ee/Randy Fink MD, and you will see right there how you get a hold of that little book. But the supplements for transfer: prenatal vitamin, vitamin D, vitamin E, CoQ10, L-arginine, and omega-3 or fish oil. And I say you take them all up until positive pregnancy test. Once you have that positive pregnancy test, the only thing that you need to stay on is the prenatal vitamin and the omega-3. I feel pretty strongly about that fish oil, about the omega-3, because there's some pretty good evidence showing that using omega-3 during pregnancy improves both the cognitive scores of the baby and the visual acuity of the baby. And that's because the retina, which is the part of the eye that captures the light and transfers that signal to the brain, and the brain itself are actually made of what are called phospholipids. And that's exactly what omega-3 is. Now, here's my advice on omega-3. And that is, you can get a giant bottle of it from like Costco or something like that, and for pretty inexpensive. But the thing is, make sure that you get the odorless, the burpless, because what they do is they literally take a sardine and kind of wring it out. And that's oil that predominantly comes from a sardine. And if you burp that thing up, you will not want to be in the same zip code with that bottle of fish oil ever again. So the odorless or the burpless, the difference is that some of those are designed not to be metabolized in the stomach, but rather to pass on to the small intestine where they're opened up and you're absorbing it from there. Or sometimes they're sort of manufactured with some like lemon oil or something that is designed to kill the fish taste. So yeah, odorless, burpless, that's an important one. Hey, a special shout out to Jen Hardwick over here on the Facebook side. We are here together and the struggle is real, but Jen says, so is faith and hope. And I think those words, Jen, are the very reason that I do the 5:30 Fuzzies with Fink, because other people share that same sentiment. This is really a great group of people. And you may have heard me say before, I kind of feel like there's not a person on here who wouldn't really do anything to help somebody else out who's going through the same trials and tribulations that they are. I think everybody here really wants to help each other. And that's a very special breed of people. And I would like to say that part of that is because, well, obviously you migrate towards Fink, but really more realistically, the struggle is real, and this is stuff that we have to go through as humans, but it really makes such a difference to know that other people are on our side. And that's the point of the Fuzzies with Fink. Jen, you are very articulate, and I appreciate you saying that there. Let's see what else. Yeah, Alicia, please send me a photo. Indeed. Risa Boo, hi there. Kowser says, I'm taking prednisone 5 milligrams twice daily. I think you mean 5 milligrams twice a day. Next month, I'm going for transfer. Previously, for 4 months till egg retrieval, I took prednisone 10 milligrams twice a day. Now the dosage is the dosage enough for transfer? I see. So I think you're saying you had been on 10 milligrams for 10 milligrams twice a day. So that's a total of 20 milligrams for your egg retrieval. And then now you're on a little lower dose for your embryo transfer. So I will tell you that the use of prednisone, which is a steroid, for egg retrieval is not something that is universally done. There are some who believe it may have some improvement on egg quality, and there are others that say the evidence just isn't there. So I don't want to speak ill of anyone else's protocol, but I typically, in the general population, do not use prednisone for egg retrieval now. However, I think that there is little downside to using it for embryo transfer. And for embryo transfer, unless we know that there is something inflammatory there that's causing an issue, I think 5 milligrams twice a day or even 10 milligrams once a day ought to be pretty adequate for you. So, Counselor, I think you're okay with those numbers there, even though you were on a higher dose before. Now, it sounds like you have been on prednisone for a long time. And that's one of the things that I don't feel great about that, because prednisone is not a benign medication. I don't like to see people on it for long term because it can have some adverse effects on you. But here's an important thing, really, I want everybody to know, since I know a lot of folks out there are being seen in a practice where they routinely use prednisone for everything. People end up on prednisone and they stay on it for a long time, and until someone tells them to stop. Most important thing to know is don't stop your prednisone suddenly, especially when you've been on it for a while. You have to taper off. You have to go down gradually, because if you stop it outright, it can make you very, very sick. So remember, a prednisone taper is important. If you're only on it for a short term, like for a week, or, sometimes people will go on prednisone if you get a bad cough, like a bronchitis or some sort of upper respiratory infection. You don't necessarily have to taper it if you're on it for a very short period. But for long-term use, or certainly over, longer than 10 days or so, do not stop it suddenly. Taper it down. Hey, Lauren and Jazzy Poo, I haven't seen you around for a while. Marie says, looks like Marie Michelle says, what protocol can give the best results after excision for stage 4 endometriosis? I have celiac disease. My AMH is 0.9. I did 2 egg retrievals that only gave me 2 aneuploid embryos. Well, the issue there is that the ovarian reserve is what we would call diminished ovarian reserve, because it's less than about 1.0. What does that mean? That means that I can predict that your ovaries are not going to respond in such a robust fashion that you're going to make 20 eggs, right? In all probability. The issue of the aneuploid embryos doesn't have so much to do with the AMH. It has more to do with, depending on how old you are, and I don't think you told us here, Marie, but aneuploid versus euploid kind of has to do more with your age, whereas the AMH gives us a prediction about how your body is going to respond. Now, you did 300 of follistim and you used some HCG, LH. One thought there is that, all right, that's a reasonably, that's a slightly higher dose. You could try a lower dose. Sometimes a lower dose may improve the number, which is kind of counterintuitive, because we think, oh gosh, if I need to get more, then I should increase the dose, right? Well, not always, because increasing your dose does not have a direct effect on your recovery. If you came to me for a consult and said, well, I'd like to do IVF with you, Dr. Fink, and this is what I was on before, and this is what I got. What I would say is I would like to change your medication. Instead of using the HCG LH, I would recommend you use the medication that's called Menopur. Menopur is also known as human menopausal gonadotropin. And the reason for that is because it was originally extracted from the urine of menopausal nuns in Italy. Yeah, that's a true story. And basically, it's a form of FSH, just like your follistim or your gonal F is, but it's a little bit different. It includes some subtypes of FSH that can talk to different receptors in the brain and the ovary. And so as a result, I think that improves egg quality, and there is some data to back that up. Now, you may not get more eggs because that's going to be kind of dependent on, again, a little bit dependent on the dose. But I would suggest that you think about using a different medication. Now, there are some practices that say don't spend your money on Menopur, just use HCG because it is exactly the same. And it is absolutely not exactly the same. And in that scenario, what they're asking of you is that you spend your money on more cycles of IVF instead of on the medication. And I understand that you want to be able to have the flexibility. But since you have some experience here with using that HCG-LH, and we saw the outcomes, I would be tempted to say, let's switch that medication to HMG. And that's the Menopur. And sometimes you can even alter the ratio of Menopur to FSH there in order to increase the probability of better quality eggs. So that's a little bit out of the seat of my pants, and it may be a lot to kind of digest. But if you came to me, that would be what I would probably look at and say, just based on what you've described. Hi to Lana, just starting our journey, but I'm very worried about my age. How old are you, Lana? Let us know. Lana's on Facebook over there. I can maybe opine a little bit more if you tell me how old you are. And speaking of which, Zenny in Miami says, I'm 55 and I want to have a baby. I would say babysit, Zenny, because then you can give the baby back at the end of the day, Can 55-year-olds have babies? Well, here's the thing about that. Your uterus does not age at the same rate as does your ovary. And Lana answered the question here. Lana is 54. So what are the odds of being able to conceive with your own egg if you're in your mid-50s? And the answer to that is, unfortunately, with your own egg, those odds are very, very low, if not impossible. And I'm hesitant to say impossible because, the minute you say impossible, there's, an article about a lady in India who spontaneously got pregnant at 70 or something like that. But when we're in the menopause, and as we approach menopause, and the average age for menopause is 51.4 in the United States, we're basically done with the eggs that we have in the ovaries because all of them were there on the day of our birth. And as we mature, those eggs start to go away due to the process of aging. Now, your uterus can absolutely withstand being pregnant because the uterus doesn't age at the same rate as the ovaries do. So if we were to do something like use a donor egg and create an embryo with partner sperm, then we're still making an embryo that is going to have every drop of your blood flowing through it, and the environment in which that embryo grows, which is inside your uterus, is going to determine so many things about your baby that's what I would recommend for you if we're in our mid-50s. Again, you can be menopausal for 10 years, and we can place an embryo, get your uterus ready, and place an embryo on the inside. The uterus does not age at the same rate as the ovaries do. So Jen says, and I understand, I'm a little younger, 43, and I'm worried too. Well, when we are starting in our 40s, it starts to get harder and harder for us to be able to have a baby. Will you look at my egg quality? And the answer is, well, we can't directly measure the egg quality, but we can extrapolate based on the measurement of a blood test called the AMH. So that'll be one of the things that we check in you to see kind of where you are and how many eggs you might have left in the ovaries. And that's kind of one of the first pieces of information that we get. And Zenny, if you have a baby, I want to deliver it. How about that? All right. Let's see. A CNY nurse today, this is from Angela, told me, said you can't, and I'm not doing a fresh or frozen transfer. Gosh, I forgot what we were talking about when I said that's what you should do. What was it, Angela? I can't remember. I'm sorry. Feel free to email me if we can't get to your questions here live tonight. You can email to askfertilitywithfink at firstfertility.com. Again, that's askfertilitywithfink at firstfertility.com, and we will answer your questions top of the show next week. Angela, gosh, I guess I'm just getting old. I can't remember what we were talking about there. Let's see. We said hi to Amber in Gulf Shores, and who else we have here? Alicia said 35 at retrieval. So, yep, your odds are pretty good. Brazil nuts, Amber asked about, are they worth the hype? If so, when before FET? And I would say, Brazil nuts are a little bit of a fad, but I would say nevertheless, there are some good things about it. So sure, add Brazil nuts to your diet. I think they're actually really good. Anytime the more the merrier. And you're probably looking at a transfer in the month of November. So go ahead and start eating some Brazil nuts. Now, how many Brazil nuts do you need? Who knows? But, a little handful a day is probably a good thing. Put a little bowl out, just snack on them periodically. They're kind of fun to crack open, but if you get the ones that are already shelled, it certainly makes it easier. Brazil nuts also kind of make a little mess. The shells kind of dissolve and get kind of get every place. But hey, that's a good question. Hi, Sydney. Good evening. And Sydney asked, what are the guidelines to transfer an embryo after menopause? What does the process entail for the mom to be? Well, depending on age. So we, certainly as we mature, our bodies undergo lots of changes, especially in the cardiovascular system. And that means that all those little blood vessels and sometimes the bigger blood vessels start to have more issues with blood being able to flow through those vessels. And so depending on your age, we usually like you to have a cardiac clearance to make sure that the heart and the vascular system is healthy enough to maintain the pregnancy and to not be at any risk to you. We also like to know that the chronic kind of things are taken care of. So if you've got a little high blood pressure or certainly blood sugar, all those things we want to look at. Those are really kind of the most important parts. Now, for a woman who is in menopause, the uterus is not used to having that estrogen. It's not used to making a lining. And so usually what we do is we prime you for a couple of months, give you some estrogen and some progesterone to start to build a natural lining back to the uterus so that it's ready to maintain that pregnancy. And that's really kind of the most important parts of things there. It's getting the uterus ready and just making sure that your body is healthy enough, not only to deal with the getting pregnant part, but the staying pregnant part. And what's that going to do for the baby, to having the baby, and then being after the menopause and having to deal with a newborn. Because remember, gosh, the sleep deprivation thing is real. It's very, very real. And that takes its toll on you for sure. So just really want to make sure that you're healthy enough and that your body's ready. Hi, lovely Onyx and Plant Honeys. Grace, if I didn't say hi, I think I said hi before. Grace, haven't seen you around for a little bit. Congratulations on your baby. Plant Honey says, an 18 millimeter follicle and a 3 millimeter lining on cycle day 5. By cycle day 9, the follicle is 27 millimeters and the lining is 9 millimeters solid, not trilaminar with free trace fluid seen. Would you proceed with a transfer without trilaminar lining or wait? I see. Okay, so it sounds like you are doing a some sort of natural transfer cycle. If your follicle on cycle day 9 is 27 millimeters, I think that follicle probably does not have an egg in it. So I thought you were going to ask about about a retrieval, and I would say that one, my guess is that grew too fast. That's probably what's going to be called an anovulatory follicle, or a follicle that doesn't have an egg in it. So what we're looking for there, trilaminar, three laminar layers, a three-layered lining, which is basically the top layer, the bottom layer, and the interface that you see between. That's trilaminar, and that tells me that that lining has been estrogenized to the point where it is ready to go. Once you start making progesterone, that trilaminar lining changes and it becomes more heterogeneous. It becomes kind of more, the three layers start to kind of blend together and you just sort of see a blur. And that tells me that the progesterone has done its job. There are many practices that will look and say, certainly in a medicated cycle, that, gosh, if you don't have a trilaminar lining, it's not time yet to start your progesterone. So if you want to be completely, rigorous about that, plant honeys, I would say it sounds like this is not the best cycle here for you. For whatever reason, on cycle day 9, that you got that big anovulatory follicle, you've got some fluid in the lining, which means it's probably a little raw. It's probably not the best environment there. And if it's not trilaminar by the time you're ready to ovulate, then it really may not have been prepared optimally at that point. So I'd be real careful there. I'm not sure that this cycle sounds optimum. Well, let's see. Marie had 20 eggs retrieved, but only 5 mature, 36 years old. And I can't remember what we were talking about before there, Marie. I'm sorry. Gosh, folks, it's already top of the hour. Gee, man, this time just really flew right by here. So again, if I wasn't able to get to your questions here, please email them to me at askfertilitywithfink@firstfertility.com, and you will be at the top of the show next week. This whole fertility business is not the book of your life. It is merely a chapter. And what do we do with these chapters? We rewrite them, and we do that together. Folks, every step forward with love, every step forward with kindness, because as we've talked about, there's just not enough kindness in this world. What do we do at 5:30? We're trying to spread that kindness around, trying to do the right thing, and know that every step forward should be one with hope, because tomorrow is a new day, and it's full of all new adventures. So until next week, I'm Dr. Randy Fink. Thanks so much for being here. Good night. Bye.